Evening, wherever you may be in this world, we are welcoming over 214 people from over 14 countries. This is the It's Not Okay webinar against gender-based violence. My name is AB Mkhwatsane, and it gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome all of you to what's going to be an absolutely incredible experience. We've got some incredible panelists, we've got an awesome keynote speaker, and we've got some great content. What we're really speaking about today is the scourge of gender-based violence that is happening the world over, the continent over. And we're asking, what can the private sector do to step in to increase our ability to fight the scourge? Only 2 weeks ago, I was at a conference where we were discussing the launch of the 16 days of activism in South Africa. And the keynote speaker really spoke about the fact that the face of gender-based violence in South Africa is a Black woman. And it's only so ironic that actually most families in this country are raised and brought up and protected by Black women. It is absolutely bizarre to me that the very cornerstone of our society is exactly what we are attacking on a daily basis. Only yesterday in South Africa, the Minister of Health announced that we were going into the second wave of COVID in South Africa. While that is a really serious pandemic and something we should all be concerned about, it just really got me thinking, how many times and how many waves have we had of gender-based violence in South Africa? The president himself said that it costs between 24 billion and 42 billion rand a year in South Africa to manage and mitigate gender-based violence in this country. It is a big business and it is a big concern. But we know that the private sector has a serious role to play in helping us fight the scourge. And what you're really going to hear today is from an incredibly experienced and committed panel and speakers around exactly how that's going to happen. Please, if you have questions, you can participate in the Q&A. We will moderate those particular questions. I will put them forward to the speakers and the panelists that we've got, and we'll get through as many of those as we can. But really, with no further ado, I wanted to introduce Dickie Barnard, who really has become a very dear friend of mine, who is the Chief Executive of the Shared Value Initiative on this continent of Africa. She has brought this movement together. It is really an incredibly powerful, the most powerful shared value consortium in this continent. And she has brought together a really incredible movement of people and thinkers, creatives, that will be able to really bring together corporates and bring together the public sector and bring together us as people to fight really what is our most urgent needs. So Dickie Barnard, over to you.
Thank you, AB, and welcome everybody. But before I go into my official welcome, I would like to share with you, just to set the scene, a video that was taken last year. It's just it's 1 minute long, I think. It was taken last year at our Africa Shared Value Leadership Summit in Nairobi. And it is a lady called Adi Jadasimi from Ladle. She was named by Forbes as one of the most powerful women in Africa. And this is what Amy had to say about gender equality.
It's not going to be possible for Africa or any other continent to achieve sustainability unless we have gender equality. If you have equal parity between men and women in the workplace, you could increase global GDP by $27 trillion. So that's a huge amount of money. Women tend to make decisions that favor sustainability more than men. Just having a different voice in the room avoids groupthink, which is particularly important for Africa, for most of the countries in Africa that are trying to industrialize, because we need new ideas. We need different solutions in order to create the kind of sustainable world we all need. If you have at least 3 women in the C-suite, you can increase your profitability by up to 45%. My advice to all CEOs is that you have to actively invest in recruiting and promoting women. Without women in your company on an equal parity with men, you're going to not be able to compete with your competitors and lose billions of dollars in profits over the next decade.
Just to follow on, as Amy Jadasimi said, and I'd like to repeat that again, we will never experience sustainability in Africa or globally if there is no gender equality. So welcome again all. I'm Tiki Barnard. I'm the founder, CEO of the Shared Value Africa Initiative. We're a Pan-Africa organization, and our work is driven to influence, motivate, and advocate for change in our private sector. Change that see the private sector leaders and organizations shift organizational focus and strategy from a profit-only focus to profit with purpose, to ultimately create prosperity for all. We as the Shared Value Africa Initiative support gender equality and women empowerment, as we believe it can change the business landscape, the economy, and society forever. We started the gender-based violence femicide It's Not Okay movement on June the 8th, when Tshegofatse Pule's body was found hanging from a tree in the west of Johannesburg after being missing for 4 days. Yet another gender-based violence and femicide victim. If 1 in 3 women will, according to the World Health Organization, experience some form of abuse in their lives, then we, as the private sector, need to realize that if we are employing women, 1 in 3 of those women that are working for us are experiencing gender-based violence and need our support. Gender-based violence is a big focus area at the moment. And specifically with our president who is supporting this fight against gender-based violence. And a lot of work has been done by civil society organizations and some committed private sector organizations. But we have not been able to reduce gender-based violence. What we need is more than just campaigns. We need implementation. We've got all of these laws, so we need to implement them. We need to take action. We need to raise our voices that gender-based violence, it's not okay. And yes, gender-based violence is not something that popped up during COVID-19. Yes, COVID-19 made it worse, but it was there years before COVID-19. But we just chose to ignore it, hoping that if we keep quiet or sweep it under the carpet or get a good lawyer, that it will go away. And today, in closing, I want to appeal to all our leaders out there. Don't wait for somebody else to take the lead before you do something. Your organization's reputation, credibility, and sustainability is online. To our faith-based organizations, our churches, our priests, our pastors, our rabbis out there, we need to hear your voices loud and clear in supporting the fight against gender-based violence and femicide. To all those that work so hard to support the fight against gender-based violence and femicide, a big thank you. Also, thank you to Gautrain and JCDecaux for displaying our It's Not Okay messaging and for supporting the It's Not Okay movement. You two were the first ones to step up, and thank you for that. And to all the abused women and girls out there, please remember, it's not our fault, and never ever take the blame. And to our other sisters out there, let's support each other. As women, together, we are so much more powerful than on our own. And ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our keynote that almost needs no introduction, as she is a woman that's in the forefront, tirelessly fighting for women empowerment, gender equality, and reducing gender-based violence and femicide, not only in our country, but across Africa. She's a force to be reckoned with, pulls no punches, and we'll be talking today about how we can work together to fight gender-based violence and femicide. Please allow me to welcome Anne Kituku-Shongwe, representative for UN Women South Africa Multi-Country Office. Anne, thank you for being with us today, and a great honor to be able to listen to you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiki, and really thank you for that very kind introduction. No pressure, but thank you so much. And I just want to say good morning to everyone. I want to recognize Professor Olive Shisana, advisor to our President Cyril Ramaphosa, who has been a true warrior in the forefront of driving this agenda of gender-based violence and gender equality. I also want to recognize all our panelists who are here with us, and really women and men who are really at the forefront of of this gender equality battle, and to everyone from everywhere across the world. I actually am excited because I see a couple of friends from my home country, Kenya, and saying hello. But let me just get to the point on this, and thank you so much for the opportunity. But just to say that as we start this conversation, I don't know how much we know about the theme for 16 days, but this year has been quite an interesting one because globally the theme is fund, respond, prevent, collect. And the fund one is so important because given the figures that you mentioned, Tiki, that indeed we now know that the cost of violence to our economies and therefore to each of our businesses is anywhere between 1 to 7%. In Fiji, it is 7% of their GDP that is a cost to the economy. So as we think about how we invest in gender-based violence, it is not a cute thing to do. It is not something that we do as a project on the side, but it is fundamental to how our economy and our business thrives or doesn't. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. But South Africa, I think, was very innovative in coming up with a national theme that focused on the issue of economic justice. And I will say that we have evidence now emerging that what really works to end violence is a combination of two things, which I'll talk about through my keynote. And the one is that if we can invest in changing the mindsets, the beliefs, the way men operate, and the normalization of violence on the one hand, and then improve and enhance the economic livelihoods of women, and think about it in one community, think about it in the same community. So these are the same men who have been perpetrators of violence, who we change and focus on transforming in terms of their perspectives, and the women in that environment whose vulnerability, economic vulnerability, is increased by providing economic opportunity. We can actually reduce the perpetration of violence by over 50%. So we know what works, and we have evidence of what works. But what we also know is that violence, the biggest war, is in our homes. It is our intimate partners. And that, I think, is what makes it so complex, because it is not an enemy out there who is walking the streets under some bushes and attacking women. Yes, that happens, but that's not the biggest problem. 30% of women in a relationship report that they have experienced violence from an intimate partner. In UN Women, we know this is about 243 million cases annually of intimate partner violence. But also 137 women are killed by a member of their family every single day. And we've got data that shows us who are the leads. And it's sad to say that in Africa, our #1 lead, believe it or not, is Lesotho. Lesotho has the highest number of women who are murdered by a member of their family or an intimate partner than any other country across Africa. Second is South Africa at 12.5 out of every 100,000. Other African countries in that list include Guinea-Bissau, Cote d'Ivoire, just top 10. And I mean, these are countries that we somehow don't even pay attention to and focus on. And the numbers grow. And so we know the data. We know that the level of violence for women in intimate partners is high, whether it's sexual or physical or even emotional. What was interesting about what COVID has introduced to these numbers is that we found a new form of violence, or one that perhaps has been hidden behind closed doors, and that is a combination of intimate partner violence and family violence. In every one of our countries, we've reported a serious spiraling, or surging rather, of teenage pregnancy. And what that's telling us is that this is happening in the homes, and it's happening from family members where young girls were locked up. And so we conducted a citizen survey, and we're doing these surveys across the African continent, and they are pointing to the seriousness of family-related violence in our homes. And so we have to figure out not just what do we do about violence in general, but how do we start building a stronger family network and system to be able to catch and report those cases early in the process. So I'm going to talk about 4 things that I think are important for the private sector to pay attention to. The first one is we've spent so much investing in how to respond to violence and not as much in preventing the violence. But also, violence is an expression of gender inequality. And so in private sector companies, we have our women empowerment principles that many of you are signatories to. In South Africa, there are 80 companies that are signatories to the women empowerment principles. And every one of these principles is what shapes whether or not you're a gender equal company or not. High-level corporate leadership, right? 27 of our companies, as you heard from that wonderful video, very powerful video, we can translate our revenue and bottom line if our high-level corporate leadership take responsibility. But more importantly, take responsibility that in their own company, there will be no violence. And that means inside the workplace, but it also means with your partners, with your customers. How do you actually leverage your company to make sure that there will be no violence in that place? Gender equality in the workplace that ensures non-discriminatory practices. So as long as we're okay with living with the criminal offense of discriminatory unequal pay, as an example, then why are we surprised that we would have sexual harassment and violence in the workplace? The third point in our third principle is about employee health and well-being and safety. So every single company is required now, and the workplace ILO Convention 190, which was from 2019, now has different African countries, and South Africa is one in the lead, that are ratifying this convention, have already released a code of good practice in the workplace that requires that every company has a violence and harassment policy in the workplace. So make it your business that there is clean reporting. There are ways that you can identify these incidences. There is a buddy system. There are some ways in which you can ensure that violence and harassment in the workplace is not tolerated. Equity comes from investing in women, investing and training women to ensure that they can increase. And that's principle number 5. Principle number 4. Principle number 5 is about enterprise development, supply chain, marketing practices. Put your money where your mouth is. If you say that you're a company that is about gender equality, are you buying from women? Are you unstereotyping your marketing? Are you making sure that everything that you do is tracking and ensuring that women are benefiting from it? Not at 1%, as is the global average, but at least 40 to 50%. We talk 30% all the time, and I don't know why we are stuck on the 30%, but 50% is where we need to get to. So let's talk about that. And then your community advocacy. And this is an area that I really want to challenge you as a private sector, because you have wonderful access to CSI investments. Do you invest in ending violence? Do you invest in ensuring that the communities that you serve are safe in wherever they are? So think about that and how you use that funding. And finally, I looked through several sustainability reports before this meeting. And in all honesty, we're excited about climate and our impact on the environment, but very weak on our gender markers. And the gender markers in our annual sustainability reports have got to be strengthened. And as you strengthen them across all those indicators I talked to you about earlier, and not just about how many more women have you employed. The issue of violence is one that I want to hone in on. Prevention. Prevention. And you know, a lot of you have done training on unconscious bias, and that's a wonderful thing to do. But many of you stop there. You do the once-off training and people tick a box. But we still find that the culture that normalizes the perpetration of violence remains prevalent in many of our companies. So we want to be able to do some deep work where, you know, and we have a project that we call 10 things that men can do. And we can create one that says 10 things that men can do in the workplace. Bystanderism is a culture where we are complicit in our silence. And I think Nelson Mandela has talked about this. The men and women who do nothing are complicit with those who commit the violence. So if you are not willing to take the step to make sure that the guy who makes that comment next to you at the bar as you have a drink about the woman who walked in with a short skirt, or just knowing that somebody is using his power to influence HR practice and recruitments, and another one who is openly violating. If we don't change this culture, then we remain where we are with this perpetration. And we've been able to do some really deep work with our He for She a global campaign, working with CEOs, but also working in spaces where violence is prevalent, like in taverns, working where men gather, and being able to have them have those tough conversations where they call one another out. The Unstereotype Alliance that looks at stereotypes and unconscious biases in the way you do your marketing and ads. And I won't raise the issue of Tresemme, but we all know about that story. So, you know, let's really invest in that. You know, Tiki, you talked about faith action and really working with the faith organizations. We've created this massive collaborative with faith organizations. And we work with faith organizations because they have the power to influence what happens on every street, every ward, every district, because there is a faith organization, whatever faith that it is, everywhere. Just like there are taverns, there are faith organizations. So in these faith organizations, many women do not report. In fact, it's less than 20% of women who report cases. And why? Because of fear from themselves, that if they put themselves out and go and report a case, or you go and report on somebody's behalf, that you would be victimized. We're working with faith organizations to walk with you and go and report cases, but also to track on every street where violence is taking place. So if you, as has been done by the Solidarity Fund of South Africa that was established to respond to COVID, if we could, Tiki, as I wrap up, think about establishing a solidarity fund against gender-based violence where private sector companies, many of whom already invest, and we've got, you know, partnerships with Vodacom who support the GBV Command Center, partnerships with MTN who do digital solutions for students in universities. In Tanzania, Unilever are working in the tea estates, and I can give you list upon list of wonderful initiatives, but many of these initiatives are at the periphery. They're not at the center. They don't do the analysis to ensure that if I do this, if I invest here, will it create transformation in the communities that I serve? But we want to create this kind of solidarity and the kind of culture where you really invest in women's sustainable livelihoods, in women's economic power. You invest in change in the culture and mindsets of men. That you really are investing in zero tolerance in the workplace, that you create a vision that you can look back and say, truly, if we were to look back and have a wonderful news, breaking news message in another year, when we come back to 16 days, and that breaking news message says, Africa has turned the tide, they have flattened the curve on violence against women and girls across this African continent, then we will be able to rest knowing that our grandchildren know that we have done everything that we need to do to create the transformational environment that will turn the tide. We know what to do. We know how to change it. We have the resources to do it. We have the examples amongst us. All we need is to create the collaborative, the intention and the investment, and decide that, like shared value, we are going to create a shared value platform that transforms the story of violence against women, because the private sector has the power to do that. I thank you. Over to you, Abby.
Thank you so much. And that was such an incredible talk. I mean, you know, what I take from that is your statement around what are the 10 things that men can do. And I think what we do often is we externalize gender-based violence. We speak of it as if it's somebody else's problem, when actually it's all of our problem and we can do something about it on a very personal level. What we're about to hear from our panel right now is really what, within the auspices of their respective organizations, they are doing to fight gender-based violence. We have an incredible panel today following on from Anne's incredible talk. The panel is made up of Taki Nechitenze, who is the Chief Officer and Executive Director of External Affairs at Vodacom, Dr. Barbara Jansen-Foster, who is the Senior Executive Manager, Communications and Marketing at Gautrain Management Company, Hloniphile Mtolo, who is the Country Chair and Retail GM of Shell, South Africa, Bavumiles Kosana, who is a South Africa-based entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Mabasa Energy, Triposa Ramano, she is the board member of the International Women's Forum of South Africa and Executive Director of Mahomake Consultancy. Charlotte Mokoena is Executive Vice President of Human Resources and Corporate Affairs at Sasol, and William Price, who has been the Country Manager of NL Green Power in South Africa since July. What I'm going to ask each of the panelists to do in the order that I have introduced them is to really speak briefly around what their respective organizations are doing to fight gender-based violence, after which we will have another question and then really open it up. So Taki, over to you.
Good morning, AB, can you hear me?
Perfectly, thank you.
Thank you, Tiki, thank you, AB. It's quite a privilege for me to be here this morning. I am Taki Nechitenze, as you've heard, from Vodacom South Africa. As a technology company, ours is to demonstrate how technology changes lives. Our contribution to fighting GBV is a technology journey, AB, that we support. Excuse me. Our contribution to fighting GBV, AB, is a technology journey. And today we have a gender-based violence ecosystem. And this ecosystem actually looks at prevention, response, victim, and survivor support. This is for our employees, it is for our customers, and it is for the people in the communities in which we operate, because we care about everybody that lives in South Africa. This technology journey has been evolving with emerging digital technologies since 2014. And the journey started when we entered into a formal partnership with our government in order to establish the Gender-Based Violence Command Center, which is in Pretoria. We contributed to the command center integrated communications technologies, which also includes a reporting dashboard. The command center is run by trained social workers. The social workers do not belong to Vodacom. They belong to government, the Department of Social Development. The job of the social workers on a daily basis is to provide counseling on the spot or to make referrals to the shelters, to the police, or to the community-based social workers. And 3 years later, in 2017, we started providing computer training to the victims and survivors of gender-based violence in the shelters. So far, we have trained 1,320 people, the majority of whom are women. Now, I'm emphasizing this because we also support men in the shelters, which shows that men can also be victims of gender-based violence. And now, in November, just 2 weeks ago, we launched an amazing digital channel, which is an app called Bright Sky South Africa. It is a free to download app, and our teams are working on zero rating the app to ensure that if you are a Vodacom subscriber, when you use the app, you should not incur any data costs. The main features of this app include a questionnaire, which will help you to determine if you are in an abusive relationship or not. And it's very important because most people are in abusive relationships, but they do not know that they're in abusive relationships because of the societal stereotypes. The app also has a must-read stories, a series of stories and definitions that demystify gender-based violence. And in order to come up with those stories, we did not work alone. We work with an NGO called Wamaka. And this is complemented by a private journal, where as the user, you can be able to record your GBV incidents. And lastly, in order to ensure your privacy and security, the app also has guidelines on online safety tips. We emphasize online safety tips because if you do not use the app appropriately, you can actually compromise yourself. So in the nutshell, this is who we are as a Vodacom using technology. I will share more later.
Thank you so much, Ducky. If we could go on to Dr. Barbara Jansen-Foster.
Thanks, Edith, and welcome to everyone. It's wonderful to hear what Vodacom is doing and to have technology at your fingertips, because that will be the true demystifier for gender-based violence. We at Gautrain are very much the new kids on the block, and when Tiki phoned me and said, or emailed me and said, will we get involved in the It's Not Okay movement? It was in a heartbeat that I said yes, because very often with brands and if you look at with you and Vodacom, you sit back and you think, do you get your brand involved in a brand partnership with any initiative? Because you look at what is the brand payoffs, and do you want that brand association? And for me, it was not, I didn't even consult my team. It was an instant yes to Tiki, because this is what we would like to associate with. This is what Gautrain wants to get involved with. So in terms of internal internal policies in terms of gender-based violence and how we protect our people, it's part of our DNA. It's not written down. There are disciplinary policies, etc. But we've never had it. There's whistleblowing policies, so people can report any kind of gender-based violence or molesting, sexual harassment in the organization. And we are really looking forward in, like with the It's Not Okay movement, movements such as what Vodacom is, to partner and to move forward in, because we're not, as a Vodacom, as a Gautrain, as a Sasol, as a Safaricom, we're not going to win this alone. We will have to take hands, and in the true African and the true Ubuntu style, we will have to take hands and beat this together. And that is what we will, and that is how we're going to win gender-based violence. And she's mentioned her country, a Kenyan country, and I was then thinking of a quote I once read by the wonderful Wangari Maathai. She said that human rights, and I think she will not mind if I change it to women's rights as well.
is not one of those things that are put on the table for people to enjoy. These are the things you fight for and then you protect. And I think that's what all gender-based violence and to eradicate that, we have to take, and we have to, together, we have to fight for it, and then we have to protect it. This is the country that has fought and overcome apartheid. Is gender-based violence not equally important to fight for and to eradicate? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. If I can move on now to Hloniphizwe Ndolo, the country manager and retail GM for Shell South Africa, for some comments.
Apologies, AB. Just to let you know that Hloniphizwe has lost connection temporarily and is trying to connect back in.
Okay, no problem at all. Let's go on to Bavumi Leskosana, please.
Thank you very much, AB, and it's a great pleasure to share this platform with the likes of Mama Ann, Gituku Shongwe, and you, Mama Prof. Philip Shisane, and you, Mama Tiki Barnett, and every single one of you panelists. As Mabasa Energy, we are an infant organization in the Republic of South Africa, but by the way that we've attracted investments for the projects that we want to do as an independent power producer, we've realized in our initial stage, in our greenfield stage, that without women in our organizations, without empowering women, without a standard practice in the energy sector, it would be fruitless. It would be meaningless for us, no matter how much money we can put down and invest. But we do need to empower women. We do need to unlock real opportunities, real economic opportunities. We do need, as the energy sector, to come together as one, not to have talks about talks, but to have talks that lead to tangible solutions that have to do with a standard practice, where we can hold each other accountable, where we can have solutions which are measurable as the energy industry, not only as the energy industry, but if we can set the benchmark that cuts across all other industries in the private sector, I think that will be the beginning of change that we begin to see in the private sector in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pavumile. If I can go on to Triposa Romano.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. It's an honor to include us as International Women's Forum, South Africa, to this important topic. As IWFSA, one of our vision is to be the voice of women leaders in South Africa, and the issue of GBVF is one of those that, from an advocacy point of view, we really take it very seriously. We are part of the National Strategic Priorities work streams, whereby we advocate in terms of this GBVF, and from a private sector point of view, we also advocate and mobilize the private sector to actually support in terms of eradicating the GBVF. One of the things that we have advocated on, and currently there is a campaign signed by IWFSA and the Minister of Women that says you cannot hide, whereby we're saying the private sector, the JSE listed companies mainly, they must support the 6 NSPs, and also we're saying those who are perpetrators of GBVF should not be given a space in leadership in society and in the private sector. And we are appealing to the CPIC to make sure that the company's laws are changed to make sure that those perpetrators of GBVF should not be directors of companies, should not be CEOs, should not be anywhere in terms of the leadership, because what happens at home, most of the time, you find some of those who are in those leadership positions are the ones who are actually committing those. They committed at home, they even committed at work, and then they're making it the workplace not to be safe. The minute you touch the bottom line and the back pocket, people will start taking it as very seriously, because it's not only the men who are on the lower side in terms of the economic sphere, but the men also who are in top leadership, who are perpetrators of GBVF. As IWFSA, we say enough is enough. So there's this campaign that we would like all of you to support. However, as part of our advocacy, in terms of some of the companies that the women leaders are on the IWFSA, they have implemented policies that relates to prevention of GBVF in the workplace. One of the casing example is PwC, which has got a policy of domestic and gender-based violence, whereby it tackles the issue of awareness, it takes the issue of prevention, and it provides even a day offs for those perpetrators of GBVF, and also the early intervention and support, and also it provides financial support for those people that are affected by GBVF who are their employees, to make sure that they have to deal with it. And also there are proper disciplinary procedures with regards to those perpetrators who are in their employ. And also with regards to the mining sector, the Mineral Council has also in August 2020 adopted that there are policies around the issue of gender-based violence, which is a zero tolerance in terms of GBVF, and the other key aspect that they have actually adopted, and also the likes of the Anglo-American as well. They've come up with the policies around that, to make sure when the ILO C190 is actually ratified by the country, they're actually ready in implementing those code of good practice. And we also are saying to the government, we welcome them, the ratification of the ILO C190, but we want it to be taken seriously and to be ratified as quickly as possible by 2021, to make sure that all the companies in the private sector, they've got a good guidelines and also the laws that deals with GBVF in the workplace. And from an IWFSA point of view, we're saying, as much as we say to the government, we applaud, do the fund, the GBVF fund, but we are ready as IWFSA as well to assist in terms of the monitoring and evaluation in terms of the GBVF fund, because it's very important to make sure that the fund is managed by an independent person, and there must be those monitoring and evaluation that is provided. And we're excited to see the likes of the Vodacom and then MTN from a solution technology point of view providing those solutions. But the private sector now is about time to implement, because it cannot only be government and civil organizations that are responsible for eradicating GBVF. We all collectively can be able to do that. And I thank It's Not Okay movement for taking this initiative and for inviting us to come and participate in that. And remember, there's more than 10 million women who are in the workplace as we are talking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Triposa. I mean, it really sounds like you are taking best practice and you are implementing it throughout the private sector. How would you rate your level of support that you're getting? I mean, are you being met with open arms in terms of that implementation?
We are actually being met with open arms, because the International Women's Forum South Africa is made up of the successful women in their areas of sphere. And with that, we've got quite a number of women who are in the leadership positions in this country. And then as we deal with this pandemic, we actually mobilize and lobby them to say, can you please assist us in opening the doors? For example, with You Cannot Hide, we are actually engaged with the JSE to say, can you support us to make sure that the mobilization of the national strategic priorities within the JSE listed companies, there is that awareness and there is that support, and to adopt that. Also with the C190, we've also been pushing very hard within the NSPs to say, can we please make sure that government put the ratification process, because the private sector is ready to want to implement the C190, because it's got a lot of guidelines in terms of what needs to be done. And it doesn't talk only about the area of work, which is in the workplace. They talk about even on your way to the work. When you're at a conference, outside of the workplace, that GBVF, you are actually protected from the policy point of view. And the minute you legislate it, it becomes much easier, so that when you put it, it doesn't become a disciplinary process. It becomes something that you have done, which is against the law in terms of the Labor Relations Act. So in a nutshell, we are receiving a lot of support from the government. We are receiving a lot of support from the private sector through our mobilization of our members of women.
Thank you very much. That's good news. If I can move on to Charlotte Mokoena.
Good morning, and good morning. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I just want to echo what my colleague has just said from the IWFSA. I'm also a member of the IWFSA. We really are supportive of those actions that are taken by IWFSA to ensure that the CY90 becomes law in the country, as you are saying, so that we can, when we act as corporations, we act not only because it's a good policy that we have implemented, or the fact that it is something that we are part of a global convention, but it's actually against the law. It has to be against the law to mete out violence against women in the workplace and in society. I'd like to open by just saying, as private sector, we are the society in which we do business. We are not part of that society. We are the society in which we do business. And no other pandemic has shown us that we actually are. If we had been pretending in the past that GBVF is a problem in society, we have seen by this particular pandemic we're going through globally today, that actually we are the society in which we do business, because that pandemic does not know boundaries. At Sasol, we do realize that as we operate in those communities, we've got a critical and a central role to play in eradicating all forms of violence, specifically the gender-based violence and femicide. I just want to share with you some of the actions that we have taken as a corporation. We have taken actions internally, and we have also taken, as a company, we've also taken and participated in the external communities, in our fence line communities, and sometimes even in national organizations that we partner with. We are signatories of global compacts. We also look out for those conventions of the ILO and other conventions like the one in the UN that we follow with regards to zero harm at work. So when we say zero harm, we don't only mean zero harm because of occupational health. It is actually zero harm in terms of violence and harassment and bullying that we take very seriously against in our company. The second one that we focus on after zero harm is equality, and it's equality and equity. Equality in the workplace is equality even of pay, because paying women equal to paying men means that those women can become equal to the men in society and equal to the men in the workplace. We do not in any way discriminate on the basis of gender when it comes to pay. We actually put in place women in operations, and those women in operations are led by both women and men, and the participation of gender equality programs in our company are gender neutral, which means men and women participate in those activities and actions that seek out to make our culture an inclusive culture that actually does not take cognizance and does not allow GBVF to exist. We have provided resources to women in our workplace, and those resources are the ones that women themselves have identified. I'll give a classic example. We own mines as well, we own manufacturing, and we have office-based employees. Bullying happens very, very differently in those organizations because of proximity of how people work and the availability of education. So one of the things that you have done, you have ensured that there is leadership visibility in the programs that we run in educating frontline managers, in educating all our employees against GBV, gender-based violence and bullying and harassment in the workplace. And those, Anne spoke about language. One of the things that actually can come across, not as violence, because nobody will be seen as a victim or a perpetrator, is language. So we actually ask all people that are subject to bullying and harassment to speak up. So we run an ethic line, and that ethics line is actually anonymous, and we run it externally. And one of the things that we elevate all the way to the board level is gender violence, is sexual harassment, is bullying, and it is also around all the forms of oppression that we might find in the workplace. So the workplace at Sasol is managed not only by the executive leadership, but by the board. The other one of supporting women in socioeconomic advancement is we pay attention to our supply chain access by women of all levels, whether they are big industrialists or they are entry-level small business. With programs that support them, we actually manage on a quarterly basis the access to women to our supply chain, and we have made a tremendous success in the past 3 years of ensuring that beyond Black economic empowerment, we actually make sure that there is a women advancement and access to our workplace. Externally, we support citizen education, we support victims programs, we support education in the community, we support systems in the education system that ensure that there is understanding and prevention of gender-based violence. When it comes to what else can we do, we will continue focusing on managing our internal culture, managing our processes, managing our disciplinary hearing, managing education, empowering women socially and economically and career-wise. And externally, we will continue making our resources available. We'll continue participating in forums like the Minerals Council, where we're very active in the culture change and the prevention of gender-based violence in the workplace in the Minerals Council. We will continue playing in other forums and being participatory in the advocacy processes that can be put in place. We have in the past, as Sasol, being advocate for our fenceland communities and other community problems that are in our society. We'll continue seeing ourselves as a citizen of the fenceland communities in which we do business, because we are part of those societies wherever we operate. So those are the programs that we implement. We look at our culture, we look at pay, we look at education, we look at disciplinary hearing, policies, governance, the ethics line, and we make investment externally in those programs of not-for-profit organizations that are involved in ensuring that society is equal and women are safe wherever they are. Would like to congratulate the program today and all the participants and all the organizations that are here, and would like to say to it's not okay. That definitely is not okay. So as corporations, we do know that we are the society in which we do business.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. I really love that point you made around the fact that we are the society in which we do business. We can no longer externalize this. There's been a lot of conversation today even around how we will not, and spoke about how we will not be able to get to the GDP growth we are looking for without the empowerment of women. You spoke about in your organization in particular around how you're looking at pay equality. It's been well documented the world over that there is a discrepancy between what men are paid versus women. And you know, I just wanted to find out from you, I mean, certainly that's not something that can be fixed overnight, because those discrepancies have been in existence for a very long time. How are you finding that transition towards equal pay, and have you met any resistance? You know, can you share a little bit about how that process is working?
We haven't met any resistance in diversity and inclusion programs and diversity, inclusion and equity programs in the company, because it's actually led by men. So when you come to the programs that we do in the company, because we have a lot of male leadership, they take ownership. It's the men that launch women in operations. It's the men that bring out documentation and governance and information around culture. It is the men and women that are in the leadership that actually make sure that all the data around pay and all the data around hiring, promotions is made visible. We rigorously measure that information, whether it's promotions, it's hiring, it's pay, it's retention. We even monitor to a minute information like performance appraisals, because sometimes it's hidden in those small little things like performance appraisals, where somebody gets an exceed and somebody gets a meet, and the one that gets a meet is either Black or female. That is the visibility of info. That is the crispness and the minority and the minute information that we measure. So we actually pay extreme attention to every piece of data that can tell us that there is equality in the workplace and the fact that women are not disadvantaged.
Okay, thank you very much for that. If we can move on to William Price, please, for some comments.
Hi, everybody. I'm very thankful to be part of this panel and this discussion. One is to introduce Enel Green Power and activities that we, as a company, feel it's our responsibility to do in regards to gender-based violence. So Enel Green Power is a global energy company. So we're all over the world in 33 countries. In South Africa, we are the largest independent power producer of renewable energy. We have 9 projects in operation and 4 projects in construction. We sell our energy to Eskom. We're pretty spread out. We're in 5 provinces. We have a staff of 180 people. It's predominantly a very technical based company. I'm proud to say that of that 180 people staff are approximately 45% women. We have 16 different department heads, various departments, and of those 16, 11 are women. So our senior staff is 70% women based. And I think the key points of a company or a global company when it comes to gender-based violence is the first part you have to do is establish a very, very clear policy. While this seems pretty simple, it's you'll see many companies that will establish a policy but don't walk the talk. They say, okay, in our case, Enel has a policy of zero tolerance against gender-based violence, sexual harassment, bullying, and discrimination of sorts. So from a policy perspective, that is the policy. So then from there, you develop procedures on what to do in the event something's reported or something happens. So a company has to develop clear procedures so that we have a consistent processes to go by in the event something this occurs. I also, and Anne said earlier, and I would like to repeat, but I think it's as she said, it's fundamental, and it's the responsibility of every company to provide a safe working environment for all its staff. It's fundamental. That's what she said. Use this word. I even wrote it down. Fundamental, because it is. So it's the responsibility of every company to provide a safe working environment. You should not have to come to work and be worried about any sort of violence or discrimination in that workplace. I think to be able to do that, we have to have an adequate training program. Some panelists have suggested a training program. I don't know, we do have a training program where we describe situations of zero tolerance against gender-based violence as well as sexual harassment and what to do if such cases are identified. I think it's also important for a company to establish a culture of listening and getting feedback. We have common opportunities where we have seminars or training sessions where we give the employees opportunity for feedback. How are we doing? Are we meeting the objectives? Do we have a safe environment, working environment? Are we doing what our policy says? The other aspect a company can do is protect its staff by monitoring and establishing who we bring into the work family. So as Enel Green Power, we do extensive background checks. Any employee or potential employee who has any historical history of violence is rejected. We do not, to have a quality work environment, you cannot bring this into the work family. And finally, I think it's the responsibility of every company to have a wellness program or a counseling program in the event of gender-based violence, because some things, of course, happen outside the work. So if it's at the home and how this affects employees and how it affects their self-esteem and their ability to perform in the work, to provide a wellness program where they can go to in the event that something is outside the work. And in our case, we provide to every employee at no cost the ICAS counseling support system. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to represent our company and our seriousness of how we have zero tolerance against gender-based violence. Thank you.
Chris, thank you so much for that. I'm going to move on to Chris Gope, the Media and Marketing Manager of Umthunzi Community Development. Chris?
Yes, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you so much for being part of for this noble event. Yeah, I am Chris Gope, as you've mentioned here, representing Umthunzi Community Development. It's an NGO that we have actually started sometimes last year with the aim to implement, innovate, and sustainable solutions that seek to resolve pertinent socio-economic challenges within our community. But most of all, our principles and policies are based on the premise that we need to advocate for social justice for women and also become the voice for the voiceless. I beg yours, for the voiceless. There are a number of activities that we've been actually engaged in, that we have done. In fact, just to point in case, a few months ago, around in September, we identified, after having conducted a research following the strike or the engulfment of COVID-19, we realized that many people, in fact, are struggling out there, especially women in hospitals who have just given birth to their newborns. And we went there and donated baby stuff for newborns, in fact. And yeah, we're grateful to those people within the city of Ekurhuleni who opened their hearts and their wardrobes for their good condition baby clothes, and we donated all that stuff. The issue of GBV is one of the contentious issues in South Africa, and as speaker after speaker has mentioned, that this is one of the critical issues that we need to tackle. But we would like also to take a different view and bring a new dimension into this whole thing, because I think we need to identify the source as to what is the source in as far as GBV is concerned. We feel that maybe young boys or young men have been marginalized, in fact, for quite some time. They are not capacitated as equally as their female counterparts. We know that back in the days, there used to be a communication network, a SELC outreach program that says take a girl child to work and so forth, in order to empower those young girls. I think the same needs to be applied, because we're living in a situation and times whereby most, in fact, the boys, in fact, are fatherless. People such as myself, as a father, you find that we are not there for our sons and to play a critical role in terms of nurturing them and also guiding them in as far as growing up is concerned. And maybe if we could look into that and also bring this young man to the fore, to educate them about the social interactions in as far as their female counterparts are concerned, I think we'll be able to nip it in the bud in as far as avoiding well-groomed men going on to perpetrate violence against women or those who are vulnerable. So in a nutshell, in fact, that's what Umthunzi Community Development is basically doing. I think this is a coincidence. Tomorrow we have partnered with the Correctional Service in Boksburg, where also we're going to have a dialogue with a panelist, in fact, consisting of some experts from your social workers and so forth, including prison warders, and also the perpetrators of violence themselves will be there also to actually make contributions in the particular dialogue as to get into the depth of what are the causes, what prompts them perhaps to come out and maybe take actions as they've taken, and to also find out and empower each other positively at the end of the day as to what can be done going forward in order maybe to educate our boys out there.
Thank you so much, Chris. You know, one of the interesting topics that I always come across when we're speaking about gender-based violence is a focus clearly on supporting and empowering women through this. And what keeps coming back is, but don't forget young men. Don't forget the boy child. And I'm always personally in this conflict around where do we focus our attention. And I hear what you're saying is really we should do both. But when we've got limited resources and limited time, is it a either or can we really do both? I've never really kind of understood on that. But you know, what is your take? Your take is really that we balance and we attack it on both ends.
As you've just alluded, yes, there are challenges in as far as getting resources in order to partner that together. Yeah, but as I've mentioned, yes, I think it can be done. In fact, I think it shouldn't be a casting stone. We need to try so that we bring to the attention of these young men on how to treat their little sisters or their female counterparts. Yeah, I think, yeah, we need to start there and educate these young men as well. This is quite evident. There are groups which have been formed recently, groups that are speaking about men issues only, whereby men are being called to conferences and stuff like that, to gatherings, in fact, to be educated, to be capacitated and empowered as well. And obviously, whatever they gather at those particular conferences, they'll go back home and implement them. But going forward, I think it's time also we need to look at how we can assist these young men so that they can step up to the plate and understand. We've been talking about GBV for many, many years. We've been talking about 16 days of activism for many, many years. Yes, there's nothing wrong with that. But it looks like there's a spike, despite the fact that campaigns have been done, despite the fact that matches have been done. I think maybe we need to change the game this time around, and also try and redirect resources in the empowerment and resources or capacitating of these young boys.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I'm now going to introduce Lunga Majija, who is the head of operations for Sub-Saharan Africa for JCDecaux, to give us his comments.
Thank you, Abby, and good morning, colleagues and everyone at large. Just to, our business is one that is in over 80 countries globally, headquartered in France. And we've been, we arrived in South Africa, I think about 6 years ago. So we're fairly new in the country. In fact, in Africa as a whole. However, the impact that we recognize the impact that our business has on society at large, especially because of our communication tools that we have. And that is why when Tiki reached out to me about the It's Not Okay campaign, it was a no-brainer. We were very happy to support it, and we said we want to be a part of it and drive the communication in our local communities to make sure that the perpetrators of gender-based violence know that number one, we see them, and that we want them to feel that society at large is against this scourge of violence against women and children. Now, to Chris's point that he raised about taking a balanced approach to gender-based violence, I think over the years we've taken a reactive approach, which is focusing on rehabilitating and supporting women and children who have been victims of gender-based violence. However, if you look at gender-based violence as a scourge in the country, a form of a disease, we have to look at the source of gender-based violence and therefore focus on how do we change hearts and minds of our boy children in order for them to grow up in a society where they recognize girls and women as equals, number one, but also change the perception of the opportunistic approach of thinking that we need to take advantage of women and persistence and harassment of women and children. Something that we do in our business is differentiate between persistence and harassment. And I think a lot of men do not understand the difference between persistence and harassment. When there's this notion of women are playing hard to get, and we need to move away from living in the gray areas where there are certain social norms that seem to be acceptable amongst young men, where we're saying she's playing hard to get, I will persist. When a woman says, no, I'm not interested, I will persist. It cannot be. We cannot have a society of a gray area where women are being harassed under the notion of she's playing hard to get and therefore I will keep on going. I will persist to pursue. No, it cannot be. We need to get to a place where when a woman says, no, I'm not interested, walk away. That's it. And it's about men listening to what women are saying and putting themselves in their shoes and saying, okay, I hear you, and therefore walk away. But also in the workspace, it's creating a safe environment for women, because as Taki and I think it was Romano who said it, that you know, when we look at productivity in the workplace, and it therefore follows on to our growing our GDP as a country. If you have women in your business and in your society that form part of your workforce that are worried about their children at home, worried about what they are going to at home, or worried about what they are coming to at work, which is a manager or an executive that is harassing them continuously and nothing is being done, and they don't feel safe in the workspace, and they don't feel safe at home, you don't feel safe when you're walking the street, you will never have a productive workforce. And therefore, you will never have the profits that we as businesses are also chasing. So when we say profit with purpose, it means that in order to grow your profit as a business, you have to be engaged in the social issues that are not only within your business, but as a corporate citizen, you need to then play a part in what is happening in society, right? So, and it's all about having the right policies in place in the workplace. We have a code of ethics that is signed by every single employee. We have a sexual harassment policy that we discuss on a daily basis with our HR director about how we can get our employees to engage in these conversations more actively. We have a whistleblowing hotline that does not actually report to the South African office to remove a layer of management and bias where even I could be the perpetrator of gender-based violence within the workplace. Our hotline actually reports to our corporate headquarters in France, so that because we are a global business, we are a listed business, and something like this could have a significant impact on our business and society as a whole. So it's really critical that as businesses, we engage with this problem and understand that we need to empower young men to make sure that we create the society that we want in the future. It is solving the problem with young men that will create the vaccine for this particular disease. I think that's really it from my side as a start. Thank you, Abby.
Lunga, thank you so much. I think it's quite interesting that you speak about how when there is a sexual harassment complaint or issue, it is escalated directly to your highest office and it skips over the South African layer. I think that it's a major issue that people with power are often the ones that are perpetrators. And I think that's really how one of the solutions that we can use to mitigate that particular risk. There's a comment here from Shireen Matara to say that let's not blame young men only. Older men with money and who are often prominent in our company leadership are the ones who think that it's okay to abuse their wealth and then so abuse women. And I think that's something that really happens. And, you know, for me, what I'd like the panelists to perhaps think about is, are the policies that you have in place powerful and strong enough to engage even the top leaders within your organizations who are perpetrators? And that's really the test of a policy. Anyone can implement a policy with, you know, employees that are not sitting around the boardroom table. It's really functional, it's easy to get through. But what happens when it's the leadership that's around you that are perpetrators? So we will pick that up. So thank you so much for those comments, Lunga. I'd like to move on to Mr. Mtolo, the country chair and retail GM of Shell South Africa, for his comments, please.
Thank you very much, Abby. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So this is a very sensitive topic, and for me, it's something that I personally have a lot of passion for. And we're here to reflect on what our organizations do and how they support the journey towards getting to a better place. But I think it starts with us as leaders. So in terms of when I say it starts with us as leaders, I'll probably just give you an example that I had to do this year. It was on Father's Day. And on Father's Day, tradition in my family is that my kids, my wife, they celebrate me as a father and all of that. So this time around, I said to them, do I really deserve to be celebrated as a father? Yes, the stuff that you see that we do every day might be good, but what role have I played outside our home in making sure that I am visible in saying no to gender-based violence? Based on that, do I still deserve to be celebrated? So I happen to be a father of 4 daughters and a father of 2 sons. So in a situation like that, the question that I ask myself is that the 4 daughters that I'm raising, what environment that am I raising them in? How safe are they going to be? What's their future going to be like? So it's a very, very a painful thing to think about. And then I look at my 2 sons and I ask myself the question, what type of men am I raising? Am I having the right conversation with these men, with these young men, so that when they get into society and they get into become contributors to they do the right things. So we had this conversation as a family to say, what does gender-based violence mean for all of us? How do my girls understand when the actions that are directed at them are unacceptable? And how should they behave with those actions? And how do my sons respect women? How do my sons know that a woman is an equal? And the woman, I mean, when you opened up, Abby, you spoke about the role that women play in our society, and Black women have played in our society for generations. I mean, we can all attest to that. I mean, I had the greatest respect for my mother because of the role that she played in developing me to who I am. So that's from a personal note point of view, and this is something that as leaders we should be dealing with on a daily basis, that we cannot afford to say, I'm doing the right things, I don't abuse women, I've never beaten my wife up, but it's more about what do you do then? Because if you turn a blind eye and look the other way, you are an abuser. You know, at Shell, we've got, when it comes to health and safety, which is something that we believe that we are world-class in, part of the health and safety, we have a very important word that we use there, which is called intervene. So if you see an unsafe behavior, you need to intervene. So similarly, when it comes to gender-based violence, do we as men intervene one way or another? And I'm not asking people to put themselves in the line of fire and put their lives in danger, but find a way of intervening. If you see that there is something going wrong, you should know it and you should intervene and you should do something about it. Call the police. Speak to your friend, know that your friend, what he's doing is not available. We have this tendency of saying, in this particular household, there was a fight. And as friends, we stay away from it because we say, we don't know what created the fight. That's not important. Violence against women is unacceptable, and we should develop the view that violence against women is unacceptable. You know, we talk about gender-based violence being the second pandemic behind COVID-19. I disagree. Yes, millions of people are dying because of COVID-19. However, there's a lot of work right now that is being done to find a vaccine for COVID-19. So we'll get to a better place around COVID-19. There's no vaccine against the culture that we develop as a people. So the vaccine that we need to develop as a people is the conversations and is the behaviors that we have with each other and is how we do things. So in all of this, one of the things that we've done is that at some point I called all men at Shell and said, let's have a men's dialogue. You know, some people felt that, you know, this is wrong because women are not there. But I said, it is important that we sit as men and speak to each other as men to men and look at each other in the eye and said, we are the problem. Until such time that we agree that we are the problem, this thing is not going to go away. Women don't abuse themselves. We abuse women. So we sat together as men, and the conversation was extremely rich. And it was very, very interesting, especially from a younger man in terms of how they say things. And it was very encouraging for me to hear men saying that we can't tolerate this, we shouldn't tolerate this. Let's create an environment where, for us at Shell, we create an environment where it is safe for women to come to work. We are the ones that need to be able to do that. Our women need to know that it is safe to come to a Shell environment. It is safe to grow at Shell. Charlotte spoke about equal pay and so on. You know, one of the things that we experience when we started our journeys as Black leaders, irrespective of journey, is that we found that you had to work twice as hard for people to believe that you can do the job well. And that is what women are going through. You know, if people look at women when they get roles, no, she got the role because she's a woman. That's absolute nonsense. The women are equally capable to do amazing stuff. You know, at Shell, I lead a number of teams. And one of the teams that I lead, when I started in the organization, it was a team of 11 people. And out of those 11 people, there was only one woman and the rest were men. And I said to them, I actually made them sit on stage in front of everyone. I said, this is an ugly picture. By the time I leave this organization, this picture must have changed. And what's exciting for me is that as I speak to you today, that same team only has 4 men and the rest is women. And capable women. And we're doing amazing stuff because of the women that are in that team and how they think and how they are committed to do what they do. And that is very important. So one of the things that came out of this dialogue with men was we came out with this concept that can we get into a journey where we understand what is a Shell man and how should a Shell man behave. And that is something that we are very passionate about. And over time, we're not anywhere where we would like to be. But over time, I'd like to believe that you can say, when you see a man, how he carries himself, you can almost say, does this man work for Shell? That for me is important. To create a Shell man, how do we behave? How do we support men? What role do you play in society? And just lastly, respecting time, is that from an organizational point of view, I mean, we've done a lot of what the other colleagues have spoken about in terms of making sure that there is support within the organization, formal support. I mean, we have an employee engagement program, a Shell employee engagement program that helps people to be able to speak up and go through these processes. And recently, we've developed a toolkit called I Am Not Okay. So if you are not okay, you know, you've got a toolkit in terms of what are the steps that you go through to deal with it, whether you are a man or a woman. This toolkit will help you, you know, to make sure that you understand what does it mean to not to be okay, what can you do about it, and where can you get help. And lastly, we have, amongst other things, we have Shell Health, where we are working with a number of doctors who specialize in different areas, so that when people are faced with these challenges, you know, they get support. They can work with professionals that can help them here. But I think my closing comment to all of us as men is that we need to lead this. We need to actually work with women, because if we think that we've got all the answers without understanding what it is like to be on the receiving end of this abuse, we are also making a mistake. We need to work with our women to understand what it is that they go through and what role do they expect us to play, and listen. Yeah. As men, we have to listen. As men, we can't always be dictating. Charlotte spoke about who does the appraisals when it comes to appraisals. It is white men that have been there. It is men that have been there for many, many years and decide that this is how I'm going to rate you in your performance. And that needs to change. Thank you very much. I'd like to stop here without taking too much time.
Thanipiza, thank you so much. I think what you really spoke about is how we as men can internalize what action we can take to really fight the scourge of gender-based violence. And we have really come to the end of the remarks from our panelists, and we're now going to open it up to some questions. I'm going to pick out some questions from the audience. Just picking up from what Mr. Mtolo was saying, I just wanted to maybe put this to you, Daki, around how and what are you doing to internalize the mobilization of men taking action within the Vodacom environment?
Thank you very much, AB. I need to emphasize that in order to effectively fight gender-based violence, we have recognized as Vodacom that we need an intersection between policies, people, and technology. Firstly, we believe in the value of partnerships. We do not just work with government, we also work with NGOs on GBV, and some of our partners are in this session today. So in the past year, we have started giving more context and more impetus to our GBV programs in order to complement what we do with technology. For instance, during the 16 days campaign last year, we took a conscious decision to mark GBV throughout the year, not just during the campaign months, because in South Africa, it is reported that a woman is killed every 3 hours. And it really saddens me to hear some of the loud voices only in August and during the 16 days campaign, and this has to change. So in order to complement our technology, we now run awareness campaigns that include what we call lunch and learn sessions and dialogues with our employees. And we invite gender experts to come and share more perspective. But the most phenomenal awareness campaign that we launched in this year is the campaign that was started by our group CEO, Shamil. The campaign is called Be the Light. And the purpose of the campaign is to put men at the forefront of GBV. What Shamil did, he inspired the campaign when he wrote a message from his heart. He took the message that my team wrote for him, and he decided to write this from his heart as a husband, as a father, and as a brother, imploring men within the company to introspect and to show positive masculinity. Today, we now have sports teams and our male employees, including our very own AB, as fellow ambassadors, emulating our CEO. And thank you very much, AB, for carrying the torch. Last year, to complement the sexual harassment policy, the company introduced a domestic violence policy for our employees. And this policy has 10 days paid leave over and above the other leave categories. And this is to support our employees and to ensure that men are not left out. We now grant fathers paternity leave because we recognize that we cannot address gender equality and inequality if we exclude men. I fully agree, excluding men only fuels gender-based violence. And on the Gender-Based Violence Command Center, I cannot finish this session without talking about this. With the technology that we have installed, today we are able to draw statistics and trends on GBV, which we share with the presidency, and I'm happy the special advisor is here. I can tell you now that last year, the whole year, the GBV cases in the command center were an average of 151 per month. But this year, since January, and it is 11 months, the average is 500 cases per month, which means the number of GBV cases has increased fourfold this year, especially during COVID. And then on society, I need to emphasize that we recognize that we don't exist in a vacuum as a company. We operate in a society which has got very high levels of inequality. And what we started doing last year, we partnered with UN Women, and I'm talking about UN Women because they are here, and South African Women in Farming. And we introduced a Women in Farming program. But the intention here, Abby, we wanted to introduce an app for the women to use that app in order to connect across the entire agricultural value chain. But then when we introduced the app, we realized that the women, these women who are coming from the rural areas, were not digitally literate. But because we were doing this from a foundation and CSI perspective, we could not walk away. As a purpose-led organization, we decided to say, let us provide these women with basic computer literacy and basic business literacy so that they should be able to mature and use that app when they are ready. But I want to emphasize one thing, Abby, coming from a technology company, and I just want to re-echo what was said by the other speakers, that technology is just an enabler. It is not a solution to societal challenges, and it can never be a solution to gender-based violence. If human beings are complacent, technology will never yield the transformation that we require. My mantra on GBV is not technology. My mantra is prevention. I believe that prevention is better than cure, as the saying goes. And prevention starts with addressing societal stereotypes that promote the oppression, the domination, and the exploitation of women in all spheres of life. That is patriarchy. It starts with how, as parents, we socialize the boy and the girl at home and at school. Unfortunately, we live in a society which socializes boys and men to be aggressive and to be always in control. And this entitlement to control extends beyond just controlling objects, but to controlling women or controlling any man that does not conform to the societal expectations of how a man should behave. And it is this entitlement to control that nurtures patriarchy and toxic masculinity. And it leads to gender-based violence and the femicide that we are seeing in the country. And coincidentally, I just want to share with you something that traumatized me a lot over the weekend. I watched a movie, a Malaysian movie called, they pronounce it Oire, but it's written Uyare. It is the story of a very pretty, intelligent young lady who was training to become a pilot. However, she was in a relationship with an obsessive boyfriend who was threatened by her academic success from high school. It started with small things like him sulking instead of celebrating her achievements. And it became endless calls and emotional manipulation to a point where she started getting terrified of him. He wanted her to leave the pilot training and move in with him, and he did not have a good job. When she broke it off, he stalked her and he poured acid on her face, permanently disfiguring her. And as a result, she could not pursue her pilot dream. The wheels of justice were harsh and slow. Fortunately, with her determination, she got a second chance as a successful air hostess. But how many women get that second chance? The movie ends on a good note when he's attempting suicide on the eve of a court judgment, which was likely going to be in the girl's favor. And this movie, what traumatized me a lot is that it is inspired by similar attacks in some parts of the world. So whether it's rape, it's femicide, or it's acid attacks, it boils down to a man wanting to have control. And until we let men relinquish control, we will not be able to eradicate gender-based violence. If we say as Africans, it takes a village to raise a child, I am saying the village must raise good boys in order for us to have good men. Boys need good role models. They don't need control freaks. And technology should be a tool to create awareness about that. And if there's anything that technology must do, it should be to stop depicting men as the hallmark of power and self-control, and depicting women as dependents and an object of a man's desire. Of course, the needle is moving. Let's not be negative, but there needs to be more voices and critiques. So we try in the Bright Sky app that we have launched with Wamaka by dedicating 30 stories to address some of the stereotypes, to create awareness, but it's not enough. More still needs to be done. Thank you, Abe.
Thank you, Taki. I mean, I think it's clear that really the economic emancipation of women in South Africa is one of the ways that we can fight gender-based violence. And certainly there's a lot of what technology can do to help facilitate that. There was one question that came through from Gertrude Mzweni, who said, can any of the companies speak about what they're doing to ensure that there's empowerment of women in the informal sector, in the SMME sector, to help empower them to really help us in this fight against GBV? Does anyone on the panel want to comment around what any of their organizations are doing to empower women economically? Charlotte, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, we have a fund at Sasol that we call the Siaka Fund. That fund is a fund that comes in between the CSI and access to a supply chain. We do audits, for instance, on our supply chain of empowerment of Black people and empowerment of women. And we do that in different categories of SMMEs. In terms of GBV, what we look at is we look at how we partner with those organizations that support us to support the SMMEs that are on our supply chain. And we do participate in those programs that ensure that our SMMEs are brought into the fold of economic emancipation. We're also looking at ways in which we can, beyond just talking about economic emancipation, we can get into the systems of talking about GBV across our entire value chain. So we do look at economic emancipation, which is actually quite crucial in ensuring that women are independent. And now the challenge is to say, how do we then bring forth that face of a woman of power so that the control that we've just heard about is not only in the hands of men, but it's in the hands of women as well. So we do actually do a lot of work in the SMME sector. We look at our supply chain, which is quite huge, and want to find out how women are participating. We also do SMME development in the communities. And in that particular, we also partner with a not-for-profit organization in our fence-line communities to advance the equality of women.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Bavumila, I see you also had a comment.
Yes, Abby. So as part of our build program, we are also developing a workshop which will be the first of its kind in Africa. This will be used to refurbish turbines for gas to power plants. This will be a women-led initiative. It will be a women-led workshop, and it will be women who now will be the ones in charge of industry, of what goes into the components, of what drives, of the engines that drive our energy industry.
Wow, that's incredible. and in such an important sector as well. Panelists, I really want to thank you so much for your contribution. There's always so much more to cover than we have time to do. I have personally learned so much in this experience, and I really do hope that these conversations that we're having will be able to continue in not only our private forums, but also in the forums within our work environments, and that we can really begin to engage this conversation at multiple levels in our society so that we really raise this scourge and make sure that it doesn't happen ever again, that we need to stop it. I love that comment around bystanderism. I think that's what Anne said. It really sums up what I think is actually the greatest enemy, is really our ability to just stand by and see things happen without taking any personal accountability. Thank you so much for your input and your contribution. We are honored in the closing segment of our webinar today to be hearing from Professor Olive Shisana, who is the Social Policy Advisor to the President. That position includes advice on gender-based equality and gender-based violence. She was appointed to co-lead with civil society the interim steering committee on gender-based violence and femicide that led to the development of the Emergency Response Action Plan and the National Strategic Plan for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. It is a great document to read, and it really gives me great pleasure to hand over to Professor Shisana.
Good morning, everyone. And AB, thank you very much for really moving this agenda so well. And thanks, Tiki, for inviting us. And a brilliant presentation by Ngituku, as well as all the panelists. I think I was really, from my side, I'm very, very excited with what I've heard, because it means that there is a possibility of partnering with this particular group, because you really are on the ball with regard to gender-based violence. Let me start by saying that we are very much aware of the big problem of gender-based violence. It's a societal problem. Much as we are the recipients of so many memos coming in from different groups, we should always remember that this is a societal problem. It's not a government problem. It's all of us in government, outside government, that are supposed to be doing what it is that we need to do. We'll all recall that the president realized that there is a huge challenge with regard to dealing with gender-based violence. And what he did, he convened a joint sitting of parliament to make sure this is a non-partisan issue, that all of us can be able to come and work together to try to solve the problem. I had the discussions about the issue of there is no similarity between COVID and gender-based violence, because for gender-based violence, there's no vaccine. But I also heard from this discussion that, yes, there is some sort of a vaccine, and that vaccine is teaching our young boys from the beginning to understand that women are equal, and they must be equal to them, and they must be treated the same way that they want to be treated. That is a vaccine, in my view. It's a social vaccine that we actually need to have in our country. So when the president realized that there was this problem and he convened that a presidential meeting, a presidential summit in the country, he came up with an idea that we need to work collectively between the private sector, public sector, civil society, and all of those development partners that are out there. And through that, we were able to develop a national strategic plan, which we talked about earlier on. Following that, we had to have a declaration where he signed with the civil society to say, we are actually going to implement it. And if we implement this national strategic plan, we then would be able to change the course of this scourge that we're experiencing. What the president indicated, and as agreed to on the declaration, is that we must set up a GBV fund. It's important that we have a GBV fund, and that GBV fund is supposed to assist us in terms of funding the services that are supposed to be provided under the National Strategic Plan. Let me say that the key issues that need to be addressed in the National Strategic Plan as you fund it is going to be the question of accountability and coordination, encouraging that coordination and leadership, building leadership at all levels is going to be very critical for us to be able to do that. Secondly, we must focus on the question of prevention as well as rebuilding the social cohesion in our own society. We need resources to be able to do that. We need to deal with the criminal justice system in terms of safety, protection. We also need to deal with the question of response, care, and support with regard to those that are affected by gender-based violence as victims or even as survivors. It's important that we do that. We also need to strengthen economic power of women, empower women such that they do not become victims of gender-based violence, because they should be able to walk away from toxic relationships. And of course, we should be able to ensure that we do conduct research so that all the interventions that we're implementing must actually be evidence-based. Let me say that because of all of these things, the president has decided that we should have a meeting. In fact, it's a breakfast meeting, which would invite the private sector as well as development partners, so that we can be able to raise 1 billion rand per annum to complement what it is that is there in government. And the aim of this is really that the private sector companies must pledge specific financial commitments to various elements of the National Strategic Plan, which I've already identified. It's important that we reach a target of about 400 million at that event. Even if you can't contribute right there and there, pledge to say that over this year, I am going to find funds to be able to make a contribution towards the 400 million rand. And then the development partners, we are hoping that they can be able to bring in 300 million rand, and individuals who are wealthy enough to really make a financial commitment are encouraged to be able to do that. And then, of course, government itself must be able to pledge resources, indicate exactly what it is that they are spending within government, but also look at CARA, the proceeds of crime, and take some of those proceeds of crime and put in about 300 million rand towards the National Strategic Plan for Gender-Based Violence. We need to send out a very clear message encouraging Business South Africa to become actively involved in supporting the efforts to respond and prevent gender-based violence in our country, and do so at local, provincial, as well as national levels. So on the 4th of February, this breakfast is going to be taking place. We do need your support to help us to be able to raise funding, to identify the critical people that we need to bring to the table who can be able to make this commitment and make this pledge. I'd like to thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you very much for that, Prof. We really appreciate those words. So really, what's come together today is examples of how the private sector is playing a role, examples of how even those leaders within the private sector are playing personal roles in the fight against gender-based violence. And then finally, what the government is doing to really make sure that we can all come together and fight the scourge of gender-based violence as a united nation. I'd like to thank you very much for your participation and your engagement. Thank you, panelists. Thank you to Anne, our keynote speaker. I would like to just encourage you on every day, really to just take your own personal steps within your family, within your sphere's influence, to take this personally and internalize the fight against gender-based violence, because we need every single one of us to be taking a stand to stop the scourge. I'm going to hand over to Vuyo Luseke, who is a director of the Shared Value Africa Initiative and Shift Africa. Over to you, Vuyo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, AB. Really today, after such a very important conversation, I have the honor of representing Shared Value Africa Initiative and Shift Impact Africa in really just thanking all our organizations that were represented today on the panel and the leaders who really stepped up and engaged in this very important session. And I think for us, having men represented on a discussion like this is very important, as we saw, the themes around, action and accountability for men in fighting gender-based violence. And of course, to AB for doing such an amazing job of facilitating and keeping us going through the conversation. I also want to take a moment to thank members of the Shared Value Africa Initiative, Vodacom, NL Green Power, Gautrain Management Agency, and of course, JCDecaux for being part of the session, but also really supporting the movement overall. Special acknowledgement goes to Anne from the UN Women, who set the scene and created context for the session and really challenged us all to think beyond just ticking boxes in our everyday work life, and but to fundamentally how to change the culture that allows victimization to happen, overall. And of course, Prof. Shisana, representing the presidency in this discussion and, helping us think as well how we can participate, as we go forward, and the private sector's role perhaps to partner with government in fighting gender-based violence. When the SVAI started It's Not Okay movement, it was by no means a new conversation, but one that had to be stepped up, action implemented, and results need to be seen as a matter of urgency. And the participation does not end today, as today is the end of 16 days of activism, but really it's for us to continue the fight, to continue to keep in mind how we can look around ourselves, use our voices, use our resources, and really our power to act and help those who are in need. More so as a collective to look at opportunities to pool these resources and have that much more of an impact as a private sector, but also society in general, and cutting across various sectors. And I want to just encourage you all to please visit itsnotok.africa, our website, where you can get some information, pledge your support, and see how you can participate in the fight against gender-based violence and femicide, either as an individual or as part of a corporate. And I think it's a fight that we together can absolutely win, but we just need to keep going, keep fighting, and keep staying strong. Thank you again for joining us today. Have a lovely day.
City Emma tota sabelani, Emma tota sabelani, abafazi bayalila, ayo lengos, city lengos, iyo lengos, Emma tota mamelani, Emma tota mamelani. Emma tota sabela.